end up with a real problem because half of your supply is gone. You can't get more gold mining to come online because it's too rare. And you've got nothing left in the vault. So needless to say, it becomes highest bidder gets the gold. Same thing happened with helium. You'd had 2 decades of people becoming addicted to helium, but cheap helium by virtue of the fact that the United States government was selling off their reserves, and that was 50% of the world's helium supply. And now June 2018 comes and that supply is gone, finished. Prices of helium start soaring. They go absolutely ballistic. And literally they were also going ballistic because you can't launch a rocket without helium. And so there was actually a certain amount of helium that was genuinely going ballistic. But I mean, the price of helium just went absolutely bananas. And now we were in the pound seat because we had incredibly high concentrations. And to put these concentrations into perspective, Qatar produces 0.01%. You then have Russia at 0.1%. Like Australia is 0.15%. The list goes on and goes all the way up to the United States, who on average across all of their helium fields, the helium concentration is 0.35%. Yeah, we're just getting warmed up at 2%. Our average is 3.4%. And then all of a sudden we had this strike in December of 2019 at 12%. A monster blower at 12%. At which point the United States government reached out to us and said, all right, listen, what are you doing with that helium? Let's talk. So I said, well, listen, South Africa's helium needs are tiny. They're absolutely tiny. I think our phase 1 project was more than 1.5 times all of South Africa's needs. So South Africa is never, ever going to be importing helium ever again, just from our tiny little first phase project. That meant that we needed to start exporting, and who better to export it to than to the United States? So we decided to cut a deal with the United States government and said, look, you give us cheap money, and I wanted really, really cheap money, and so they capitulated and they gave us really cheap money. They gave us $40 million for 12 years with 3 years grace, and at an interest rate lower than the South African government borrows in dollars, which was just a fantastic deal. And that just gives you an idea of the importance of this underlying commodity. So we got the listing done. We had the United States government providing the debt funding for us, and then we managed to draw down on that loan in early 2020, and now we were off to the races. We found a plant, we started building the plant, and unfortunately COVID hit, and that really threw a spanner in the works. So that obviously caused the delays that we've suffered. The plant was meant to have commenced hot commissioning in July. Now, obviously, the hot commissioning is only starting in December, so we've had a little bit of a setback, and we've felt a little bit of pain. But by and large, we managed to contain a lot of those setbacks and those delays. And along the way, we turned the disadvantage into a strength by inventing the cryovac, and that obviously we can talk about that a little bit later. But the COVID wasn't all bad for Renergen. We did get the cryovac out of it. And so that kind of brings us to closer to where we are now. Now we're in a position where we've managed to prove up our reserves. The last reserve update that we did was in March of 2019. And to put the numbers in context, the 2P numbers, so in oil and gas, the magic number that you want to look at is a person's 2P reserve. That's the proven. The 2P reserves on the methane is the equivalent of about 138 billion cubic feet. I know that's a completely meaningless number to anyone, so I'll put it into real numbers. 138 billion cubic feet is approximately somewhere in the region of, let's call it 3 billion liters of diesel in terms of energy, which is a formidable amount of diesel. I mean, 3 billion liters that'll go a long way. The helium was coming in at approximately 3 billion cubic feet of helium. Now, to put that in context, every 1 billion cubic feet of helium is worth $250 million at the surface. So that is a chunky number. Those were our March 2019 numbers. Now we needed to start getting the production online, and we started work on preparing what phase 2 would look like. And so we've embarked on this insane 2.5-year journey of getting as much data underground as possible. We commenced a drilling campaign, and super proud of my team on the exploration side, who were absolute legends. We managed to develop because we had no oil and gas guys. Again, we didn't approach it from a traditional oil and gas perspective in terms of trying to find where to drill. We had a team of biologists and hydrologists, and so we threw all of our tools into the toolbox, and we managed to develop a completely proprietary way of trying to sniff the gas out, involving biological markers in plants. And our theory was that the gas obviously comes from the bottom, but no doubt it'll seep through cracks where there's more gas, and that gas will come up to the top, and that'll affect the plants. And so we got our friends in the United States to point their satellites over at our field and to take specific wavelength photographs to measure the extent of damage in chlorophyll in our plants. And that would give us a good sign as to whether or not the methane was actually coming from the ground and seeping into the roots and getting into the plant systems. It was a long shot. It was a real long shot. But anyway, we did that, and then we put a series of filters through it. And basically after about 8 or 9 months of heavy, hardcore mathematics, we ended up with a model which we then decided we were going to test. And so we chose 6 drilling targets using this along with the traditional methods. And we had this Excel spreadsheet that we basically told, find us 5 targets to drill. And the Excel spreadsheet spat out 5 targets. And then we chose, as the human beings, using all of our superior intellect compared to this dumb spreadsheet, we chose a 6th well. And then we drilled. And the machine got all 5 wells 100% correct. And us superior intellect humans didn't strike gas on our well. So I think we learned a proper lesson in that. And the long and the short of it is that, again, it was an unbelievable effort by the team, and just showing the benefits of innovation. I think we live by the motto that if you aren't disrupting, then you will be disrupted, and that's kind of the entire approach that we've taken with all of this. The natural progression from there, we're now very close to having the reserve updates based on the drilling success from here, as well as all of the additional data that we've acquired over the last 2.5 years, prepared and put into a report. And I suspect that that's probably the one of the reasons why the share price is starting to rally, because people are anticipating that this reserve update is going to come out, and that is imminent, and that is the basis and the catalyst for us to be able to move ahead with phase 2. So phase 2 would obviously require a lot of funding, both on the debt as well as on the equity side. But I think people want to see just how much gas is in the tank, how big can phase 2 really be as a project, and just how big is Renergen really going to make this phase 2, and how far are we going to take this in terms of becoming a world-beating reserve. So that's that. I mean, I've done an inordinate amount of talking. Hopefully, I haven't bored anyone to tears. If there's any questions at that stage, feel free. I can also give you the background on helium with a BLM, because that's an eye-watering story, and I could sit and talk all night.
Well, like half of the notes I prepared for this space just went out of the window, because it just covered almost every single aspect of the notes I have from my side. But I think one thing, listening to you speak and covering everything, it's like the universe was just working on your side as you start this journey. It was like supporting you along the way. Because some of those things I'm listening to, I'm like, this just basic simple luck that you guys had, basically.
We refer to it as the project speaking. We will have the best laid plans, and we'll be executing the plans, and then it all goes to hell in a handbasket, and another opportunity opens up, and it was better than the first one. And we'll shake our heads, and it's like the project spoke.
That's so true. But let's go back a little bit of something that you said, and let's go back to phase 2 of the Renergen journey, and more specifically the deal you had with Russia, with the Russian company, not Russia, the Russian company. Like, I was trying to read up on it, and how did that deal came into be? Literally, how did you discover that company?
Which one? Helium-24 out in Russia.
Yeah, Helium-24.
So that is a very, very astute question, young man. That was a very, very good observation. Because if you've done which I know you have, if you've done your research and your homework, you will have seen that the Russians are building essentially the world's largest helium facility on the planet. It's called the Amur project. It's enormous. It is absolutely enormous. It's going to start coming online in 2025, and it will ramp up to full-scale production in 2029. And it'll probably replace about 80% of the gas that the BLM had taken offline, but it won't replace all of it. So there's still a lot of space left for players like us. But the fact is that if you're building a project of that magnitude in Russia, then why on earth would the largest distributor of helium inside Russia phone up a company out of the blue in South Africa and import helium from South Africa to Russia when they've got all of that helium on their doorstep? And the truth of the matter is that I don't have an answer for you. I can't tell you. I asked them, and the answer was sketchy at best, but it does start to bring into mind questions around the ability to move that helium from Amur, which is 1,000 kilometers by dirt road in Siberia to the nearest port. You can't move the helium by pipeline. You can't move it by plane. You got to move it by a truck. And I think we all agree that Siberian winters ain't for sissies. I would not like to be the truck driver driving 1,000 kilometers on a dirt road with 30 tons behind me trying to get the stuff to the port. So that's that project is going to have its own challenges, and I can't tell you why it is that they sought us out, but they did, and I'm glad that they did. It's a decent little contract, but it certainly gave us a lot of insights into the fact that yes, the Amur project is huge, but it doesn't strike me as a project that is without its own set of challenges. I can't tell you what those challenges are. I don't know, but it doesn't strike me as they're going to be able to be completely clean sailing and launch that themselves.
Because I was reading on it, I'm like, how the hell did you guys discover them? But it's nice that you are the ones that they're the one that came to you guys, meaning they've seen something. Stas, before I go to my second question, do you have something to add? And also, guys, please do feel free to request the mic if you want to ask any question. Me and Stas will approve your request, so just do feel free. But Stas, you can go on.
Thanks, Ivan. I think I've got two questions, one based on helium itself, and maybe the other based on the beginnings of Renogen. When you said you acquired this company for around $1 or so, but obviously it had debts. My question is, how much, if you can disclose, how much were those debts that you had to take on by acquiring this asset? And then, and then the second question is it's a very quick one. How difficult is it to transport helium if you're going to send it around? Because I do know, I think the last time, I've heard the story from you so many times. The last time you mentioned that the purity does diminish over time, if I'm not mistaken.
So, two great questions. The total price that we paid, there was obviously the $1 for the transfer of equity. The liabilities that we assumed were about 5.7 million rand. So at this stage of the game, still nothing massive. But then we also took on a vendor financed loan of an additional 50 million rand. So in total, it was just shy of 56 million rand in total. Which, remember, at the time, we had no clue what was there. There were just 4 holes in the ground. And taking on that debt and only producing 1.4 megawatts of power, that project was going to be very, very difficult to get to just break even. So we took an enormous risk. We took an absolutely enormous risk. it was just one of those things that that luck paid off. But and the reason that the former owners didn't know that there was any helium in the gas was because they were taking the gas samples using plastic bags. Now, you'll know, you buy a helium balloon, either for yourself or your kid or whatever, and the next day that helium balloon isn't floating anymore. And that's because helium will escape everything. It'll escape steel, it'll literally escape everything. And they were taking these gas samples in these bags and then leaving the bags in the back of the pickup for about a month before driving them up to Joburg. And by the time that those samples had gotten up to Joburg, guess what? There was no more helium left in the bags because it had all escaped. And so they were only ever recording methane. And so neither the buyer nor the seller in this case actually knew that there was helium in the gas. So we were really buying this asset blind. And we were only buying it for the hope of those 4 wells and getting those 4 wells commercial. In terms of moving helium, it is a proper story. It's not for the faint-hearted. The gases need to be separated, and so the first step is that you take the gas into the plant, and the plant will then separate out the carbon dioxide, and you're then left with methane, nitrogen, and helium. All of that gas you cool down to minus 162 degrees Celsius. Now, bearing in mind that dry ice is only minus 80 Celsius, so you're now double the temperature below with the LNG. The LNG then falls out, and now you're left with a pure stream of 50-50 nitrogen and helium. That gas you then take down to minus 195 degrees Celsius. And now you're left, the nitrogen falls out. Now you're left with laboratory grade helium. So 99.999% pure. But it's still just gas. It's cold gas, but it's still just gas. So then, using the same principle as a bicycle pump, if you put your finger over a bicycle pump and you squeeze it really, really quickly, the pump gets hot, and that's the principle behind an ideal gas. If you compress a gas very quickly, it gets hot, and if you expand it really quickly, it gets cold. So what you do is that you take this really cold helium at minus 195, and you compress it massively. It gets really hot, and then you run it through the liquid nitrogen, and it gets back to minus 195, but now it's minus 195 under an extreme amount of pressure. And then you spin this helium through these tiny, tiny little turbo expanders that are the size of my pinky nail. They're honestly no bigger than the size of my pinky nail. They cost 80,000 euros each, and they take 11 months to carve out of aluminium. And that's because these little things spin at 3,200 revolutions per second. Not per minute like your car engine. This is per second. So it's basically spinning 60 times faster than your car engine does. And that, if you had metal-on-metal contact, it would literally tear your entire plant in half. It would just shoot off the thing. That it would be worse than a bullet. And so they carve these little grooves in it so that when it spins, the grooves create a pocket of helium, and these little turbines float on this cushion of helium so that they can expand the helium fast enough for it to be able to then drop down to minus 269 degrees Celsius, which is 4 above absolute zero. Now you've got the helium in liquid form. That then gets put into a tanker, and it's not like your LNG tanker or your liquid nitrogen tanker. This is a whole different level of insulation. So this is the thing with multiple layers of stainless steel. Some of them have some gold plating inside for radiation shields. There are 2 vacuum chambers, and then in the middle of those vacuum chambers, there's a liquid nitrogen valve, liquid nitrogen chamber as well. So it's a hell of a thing. The helium goes into that container, and from the time that it leaves the refinery, it has 45 days to get to the customer. 45 days, that's all. And the reason for that is that every single day, 1% of the original volume of that trailer, the 5 tons that you've got in there, 1% or 50 kilograms will convert from liquid into gas. And we all know that gas occupies more space than liquid does, which means that it starts building pressure. But given the fact that the tank took 2 years to make and costs $1 million, you don't want to damage the tank. You'd rather vent the helium. And so what ends up happening is that on the 45th day, half of your payload is helium, half is liquid, half of your payload is gas. There's an inordinate amount of pressure in there. And if the tank is still sitting on a ship, then someone has to get onto a helicopter, fly out to that ship, and then open up that tank and vent your helium. And you vent about $50,000 worth of helium to try and get the trailer stable again. And then you got another 5 days. Now, if it doesn't get to the customer in the next 5 days, guess what? You got to do that all over again, and you keep doing that until eventually the trailer's empty. So you got to have some proper kahunas if you're gonna move the helium, and that's why at this stage we're still in the game of we sell it at the refinery. We'll when we're a little bit more confident, we'll start looking at the trailers ourselves.
Geez, amazing story. This is a story you tell at the braai. Hey guys, I'm invested in this helium company. I don't know if you want to take over from here.
Yeah, I just want to now move to the conversation, I think, to the main event, what everyone was talking about the entirety of last week, the sports helium market and the partnership with a few companies that happened, was announced last week. Just share that journey with us. Well, I think that's the number one thing majority of people who are here want to know more about, because it was all over Twitter last week. It was all over the news, and everyone was talking about it.
This is something that I have been working on for over a year now, and I'm really, really pleased with the result. So I've mentioned to you the fact that the helium market is very tightly held. What is even more surprising is that there are only a handful of upstream producers, in other words, companies that drill for the gas and produce it in liquid form. That is ExxonMobil, who I'm sure we all know. It's the United States government, it's the government of Algeria, it's the Qatari government, and the Russian government. And those are pretty much the entire list, and soon Renogen will join them in December, January. We join that list, and that's pretty much it. That's the entire list of upstream producers. Now, the midstream market and the downstream market is where all the action happens. So I explained to you that there were these really sophisticated trailers. There are 6 companies in the world that control 98% of the world's helium. 98% amongst just 6 companies. I come back to what I was saying earlier. If you aren't disrupting, then expect to be disrupted. And I don't like oligopolies. I abhor oligopolies and monopolies. And so we got to thinking about how to shake up the helium industry, because if you look about the value chain, upstream refineries sell at somewhere in the region of about $230 to $290 per 1,000 cubic feet of helium. The downstream end users, if you're buying in the spot market, like say for instance to refill your MRI, then the price, depending on where you are geographically, is anywhere from $1,000 to $1,300 per MCF. And if you're buying it for the purpose of party balloons, then the equivalent of what you're paying to fill helium into a party balloon is over $2,000 per MCF. So there's a huge gap between upstream, where we are, and the downstream market, which is where the people at the end that need it are using it. And all of that margin in the middle is really being kept by these 6 companies. So needless to say, they've got a very big stronghold on the helium market. And we thought, well, you know what, time to break that party up. And so the intention over here was to create a visible price for what the end market looked like, for 2 reasons. Actually 3 reasons. One was that helium is the one commodity where no one knows what the price is, and therefore if an investor analyst is trying to figure out what the valuation of Renogen is, they won't know until they can see what the spot price is. So we thought, well, why not create a tradable token so that we can show people exactly what the value of helium is based on a willing buyer, willing seller. The second reason that we went about doing it was because from our perspective, it becomes an incredibly effective way of us being able to participate in the spot market when phase 2 comes online in an orderly fashion through the use of these tokens. So it's a very neat, elegant solution using the most modern technology and using Ethereum in order to be able to control the entire value process in terms of getting it out the ground and then delivering it to the customer. And then the third reason is obviously there's no secret that we're building a phase 2 plant, and that is going to require capital. And what better way to build a phase 2 plant than by pre-selling some of the commodity underground without having to dilute shareholders at the Renogen level. And you know, in the process, obviously leaving everyone with a great taste in their mouth, the ones that invest in the tokens, because, you know, we're issuing the tokens at a refinery gate price, which there's no ways anyone could ever participate in a refinery gate price of helium. Not even the likes of SpaceX and NASA get to participate at the gate level. And you know, we've now democratized that entire process, and we've offered that entire process to the retail investor through the coin offering. And that was the rationale behind it. So it was those three objectives that we went out to achieve through this offering with our amazing friends at Purple.
Here I am speaking while muted. Sometimes I never get used to this thing. I'm busy speaking while I'm still muted. And what I love what you just said about simplifying everything and bringing back the access to helium to the most basic level, and using the concept of willing buyer, willing seller, which makes things a little bit simple. And guys, please do request Mike if you want to ask any question, because we still have our guests with us. So send your request. We'll be able to accept it from our side and give it a platform to speak. But now let's just take the conversation a little bit forward into the future, into what you're willing to share, because I know there's some information you can't share with us, but what's the one thing that you can just say, like give us a little bit peek into the future of Renergy that you're looking for, that one project that you have right now that you're most excited about?
So look, I mean, it goes without saying that there are so many aspects to this. It's hard not to get excited about the entire value chain. I mean, there are so many different layers to this onion. It's a terrible analogy, but it kind of feels like that. So, you know, the helium side is obviously the sexy side, and that's the really cool side, and that put us on the world stage. But then there's also the LNG side of this, and that can't be discounted, because not only is LNG profitable for us, but more importantly, the benefit that it has on the environment is very impressive. If you look at what a typical truck will consume in a year, a truck will do somewhere in the region of about 150,000 kilometers a year. That's a low mileage truck. And that means that it'll consume somewhere in the region of about 70 to 80,000 liters of diesel a year. That means that it's producing somewhere in the region of just shy of 200 tons, actually a little bit more than 200 tons of CO2 per annum per truck. Now, putting LNG into this truck, firstly, more than doubles the profit margin on the truck, which is huge. It just means that if you are on a owner-driver incentivization scheme and you convert your truck to run on gas, you can pay that truck off in half the amount of time, and it enables you to be that much more entrepreneurial and build your fleet faster. So that part of it for me is really exciting. But then from a climate perspective, cradle to grave, LNG in trucks is about the lowest carbon footprint technology we have available right now. The electric truck is a myth. It's not going to get there. As much as I love Tesla, and I'd love to have a Tesla myself, that technology is not there for trucks, and it can't be there for trucks anywhere outside of the United States, where you get enormous incentives to hold that truck in the first place, because you need about 1 million iPhones worth of batteries in order to power one single truck. And then if we had 10,000 trucks on electric in South Africa, that would require Eskom to put 100% of its generation capacity just into recharging trucks, and we've got 370,000 trucks, so that's not going to work. It's just not practical. So we see LNG as being an incredibly exciting development for the future, both in terms of decarbonisation of the environment for South Africa, as well as just bringing some more improved efficiencies into the transport and logistics market, which hopefully in time, when people start to see these savings, we're hoping, we're not naive to think that it will, but we're hoping to think that some of those savings will then obviously also filter through to the end consumer in one way, shape, or another. But again, that's more just my personal hope. Whether that materializes or not, or someone just ends up keeping the profit, is a different story.
Thanks for that, Stefano. Ivan, can we take the question from Matthews?
Yeah, we can take the question from Matthews.
Hi, Matthews. Welcome to the podium. Shoot your shot.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can.